Good morning, intergenerational listeners, and welcome to the Diadochokinetic Show with Derek and Denny. My name's Derek.
And I'm Denny. Today we're going to be talking about technology and how it's been bringing us together and tearing us apart over the years. We've gone from a society without electricity and running water in most homes to one where almost everyone carries a small, high-powered computer around with them at all times in just the last century alone. Derek and I wanted to find out how that has changed the way that we communicate with each other, and we figured the best way to do that was to talk to people who lived through those changes.
The best place to start this 10-minute auditory journey comes from a short interview we conducted with our 71-year-old friend John about how his family spent their Sunday afternoons.
I remember that my dad on the Sunday afternoon would take the battery out of our car and you'd hook it up to the radio in the house because the radio was a tube type, was powered by a battery of the same as a car would be, but we didn't have two batteries, so we could listen to the radio only when we took the battery out of the car. So my dad would hook it up and listen to Green Bay Packer football because he was an avid Green Bay Packer fan. He loved it. But we lived in a house without electricity, without a telephone, without indoor plumbing, no running water, and that was pretty much typical.
Wow, that's really cool that the family was able to power their radio with the car battery. That actually sounds a lot like something Ted talked about when we interviewed him.
Since my dad sold them, we got a TV set. And the nearest station was in Des Moines, Iowa, which is quite a ways away. So it was hit or miss whether you got to watch anything, depending upon atmospheric conditions. Yeah. And the pictures would fade in and out, and there was snow, and then sometimes the picture would roll up and just keep rolling up. But we did manage to sit around Friday nights and watch boxing and things like that.
That was great. It's pretty amazing how technology has facilitated so many connections among family and friends. But before these things were widely available, particularly the phone, people had to communicate and connect by mail over long distances.
You don't say.
Seriously. My friend Frank told me a bit about this. Did you write many letters?
I did when I was in the service. And I wrote probably average of one a day, more than that. And I must have written to about 10 or 15 people, mostly girls. But they had to write to me first to get me started. And I did enjoy those letters, because, man, if you didn't write one, you didn't get one. So I wanted to know what's going on everywhere.
Did you feel, can you compare how getting a letter made you feel versus getting a phone call?
Nobody got a phone call in the service.
It's really interesting to hear about Frank's experiences in the service. Writing letters is certainly a form of communication that faded out with the rising popularity of the telephone, but it was a pretty slow transition because the phone has gone through quite a few changes from its beginnings to what we know today. I like what Ted had to say about phones during their early days.
Over the years when I was growing up, we just had the telephone, okay? In fact, we had a party line, and my mother was always worried about who was listening on the party line, so she could kind of tell. But as a kid, I didn't use the phone much, right? So maybe when I was in high school, telephones became more important, but they were always connected to the house. So most of the social interactions were through school and through social functions at school.
These are such fascinating stories. Through listening to these guys talk, I feel like I've gotten a great sense of what technology was like for all of our guests when they were younger. I'm beginning to think that they didn't view these things as a way to make their lives more efficient, but more as a way to connect with people in different ways. Hearing Frank talk about receiving letters made me think that maybe technology back then wasn't in opposition to more traditional ways of interacting, but was actually just complementary. We asked John and Ellen what it was like to transition from landlines to cell phones, and this is what they had to say.
And the cell phones, I look at what I carry with a smartphone. The first cell phone I ever had was actually an old, I think they were Motorola, and the thing looked like a book, great big huge thing, antenna sticking out, and you could carry that around, and if you were lucky, you'd have reception and could talk with it. For a long time, I had a cell phone in a bag that, I mean, it was like a briefcase that you're carrying around with all this stuff. Well, it wasn't very portable, but it would work.
I usually wait for people to call me. And I call my son if I have any particular thing in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't make it with my daughter. I call her every morning. And we just got started with that about 25 years ago, and we've done it ever since.
Most of the people we interviewed said they felt like technology has taken a turn for the worse as far as its influence on our personal interactions. Many of them thought that cell phones distract us from engaging directly and that they've diminished our appreciation for communication in general.
I like the personal contact. I'm used to a telephone. I can call and talk to you. Why do I want to sit and type all this stuff and send it back and forth? You could just answer and say, hello, and tell me what I need to know. I don't need, But I see that that's the thing. Watching my grandkids, how they do things. Well, we can't communicate if we don't text. Because they don't know how to talk, I guess. I don't know.
John makes a good point. Sometimes we really do need to be reminded to put our phones away and talk to the people in front of us. Jake Harwood, the author of Understanding Communication and Aging, said that the language used for text messaging on phones is essentially a generational language, one in which older people typically have little competence. In other words, older people are actually linguistically excluded from certain areas of communication using technology. I wonder if the guests on our show today would agree. What do you think, Denny?
What? I'm sorry. I was just Facebook stalking Jan on my new iPhone 5. What were you saying?
Never mind. It sounds like you need a lesson in pragmatics.
I know good and well, if I'd ever gone out on a date with some girl and she spent all of her time reading a magazine or talking to somebody else, that would have been the one and only date, But this happens all the time. We even see them at the restaurant. And you're sitting at the nice restaurant having dinner, both people with their cell phones, and why are you here? They're not very romantic.
Well, that concludes our auditory journey. Thanks for listening to the Diadochokinetic Show with Derek
And Denny. We hope you can join us next time. This show is produced by Caitlin Burkhart, Kristen Chester, Catherine Clark, Denny Davis, and Derek DeSantis.